have a question. I think so far we're operating under the assumption that we create these heroes and then people respond to them. In other words, that social change is a process led by the media, rather than the idea that media is a reflection of our society and our anxieties and our, the ways that the corporate structures want to represent certain kinds of values and so on. And I think there's been a fair amount of research on superheroes and how they emerge and how they change over time in response to kind of the context. So I wonder if we flip this a little bit, how we would think about that. How do our superheroes of today, or the lack of them, what does that how is that a reflection, and how might we think about this a little differently? Maybe flip that question slightly from the assumption that, as I said, media creates social change rather than being a reflection of it.
I think it would be basically one would need to work on human values, which are the same all over the world. I mean, the corporate values will always come in if a show is doing well. And they'll always have their demands for, maybe color or whatever they come in with. But the person has to be true to life. They have to connect with real life somewhere. They have to have a weakness.
The idea that television can establish trends or can be a pioneer in introducing concepts to a culture, as you probably know, it's always been rebutted by the fact that it's just as much a follower as it is a leader, and that those two dynamics coexist and occur simultaneously. So I think it's something that everybody always has to consider, and that we see that superheroes evolve over time. I mean, the superhero, it's like Mickey Mouse evolved over time, and Superman evolved, and Batman evolved to meet the changing social climate. And that's probably true under any circumstance. Any kind of entertainment is going to have to reflect as well as push the envelope a little bit, or introduce something so novel that it's a breakthrough. And that happens too.
But you see, the days in which superheroes were established, there were not that many television options. One didn't have that many channels to flip to. So that's why those characters became so deeply ingrained. Now there are just so many choices.
You have people who, if you look at early comic books, for example, so many of these people were immigrants from war-torn Europe. And a lot of their characters, Mouse, for example, in terms of graphic comic, were people who were victimized, who went through all these horrific kinds of experiences, were very sensitized to them. And then what they did is they translated that experience, that being a victim or being sensitized to being, quote, the other, unquote, that became something that was the basis of Frankenstein. That was the basis of the Wolfman. Many of the horror, the movie monsters really were reflections of the immigrant experience when they got to the United States, and that they were putting out their ugliness and infirmity and monstrousness as how they were treated in the countries from which they came. So that one of the things that you can certainly talk about is, how do we put people out? How do we put superheroes out who people identify with, because that's what they're experiencing? And then if you gradually bring that person who's a superhero from one who not simply is victimized, but eventually begins to turn the tables around and begin to develop more effective means of dealing with the abusers, you then role model a means of coping with your whole life. How do I change myself from being a victim to being somebody who stands up? Even if as you said, I'd rather die having done something than live having done nothing. So that's one of the things that one can consider. You have to go toward what your folktales are, what your Jungian archetypes might be, but then you also go toward what life experiences are, and how does that turn people? What kinds of things do they create out of their own life experiences? How many people have ever seen a painting? I've seen painters who make all their paintings of people going through physical, medical crises. Now, I wouldn't want to have that sitting in my living room, But to that person who made it, that's what they experienced. That's how they saw their life, and so their life became expressed in their artwork. And I think that's what we see happening in lots of different media and narrative forms.
There's a comic book called 100 Names, and it's basically creating archetypes out of the 100 Names of Islam.
Really?
Yeah, and it's made these little superheroes. It's online, and they're trying to get some production, but it sounds like exactly the kind of...
It sounds very interesting. Actually, I just got an idea while talking to you. That now the mythology and the folk tales, maybe we heard them, but how many kids of today have heard them? Because it's kind of dying out, folk tales. I mean, my son doesn't know them, he's 18 years old. My fault. But I think a lot of other kids don't know them. Would it also be an idea to pick up a character or a model who then goes through a change and a transformation, who is of the world today and dealing with things? Like, for example, a very odd idea, but these boys who become suicide bombers, they're boys from underprivileged, very poor families who are then put into the religious schools because their families can't feed them. There they are fed and taught whatever they are taught. And then when they're sent out, they're brainwashed, there may be certain hypnosis techniques used. And then when they're sent out to defuse the bomb, they're drugged, usually. Now, there have been 2 cases that I've heard of where the drug has worn off, or the boy has fainted before he's been able to defuse it, so he survived. Now, one such character who changes and then wants to stop anyone else from being subjected to that. Because the whole world knows about suicide bombers. They're happening in Iraq, they're happening in Syria, they're happening everywhere. So that might be, I mean, it might be a very...
Absolutely. There's a kernel thing right there.
Extreme thing to do.
Yeah. Anyhow, other questions? Yeah.
I don't know very much about Pakistan, I'm sorry, but I do recall a statement made recently relatively recently, in the context of maintaining security in Pakistan, and basically it came from Musharraf when he was president. Mm-hmm. And he made reference to Pakistan being not just one people, but a series of various tribes, many of them warring, and enormously hard to maintain any kind of control over, or even to describe a common identity, I suppose, is where he was coming from. Is there a common identity for these people in Pakistan?
That is what the struggle is, because there are very many different tribes. They're different tribes, they're different races. Some have originated in Afghanistan, like Irfan, and my area. Some of it originated in Afghanistan, some in Iran, some in northern India, and in different pockets of all those places. They all have different traditions, they have different ways of life, and very often they hate each other or don't accept each other because of what their forefathers have told them. So there are a lot of differences there, and that is a problem, because like when I was making my first film, because the film industry was in Punjab, because I'm not from Punjab, I don't belong to that area, so they made it a point that my film was not distributed. I mean, it was just, she's not from our area, we're not going to do it. Mm-hmm. And they have, because their province is the agriculture one and is the richest that way, so they have like about 60% of the market. So if they're not pleased with you, you're in trouble. Now things have changed.
So actually, I'm trying to figure out how to make this into a question, but I guess my question is, why is the emphasis on the individual hero? So actually what we're talking about is like the project of nation building, the project of state building kind of becomes also part of television making because of the distribution needs, because of the needs to actually have a sufficient market. And so this idea of a superhero is, I find it problematic. I was trying to figure out, well, why? And I think that Lisa and also that fellow, I can't remember your name always, I'm so sorry.
She's talking about you.
James, thank you, James. Put your finger on it. It's like, the superhero is in a way, classically, kind of about the anxiety of masculinity. And it's really about the individual. And it's really about, this sort of like the fear of this masculine individual is not going to be able to, mature and be strong and protect his family, whatever. And so it seems like I'm wondering if maybe the real problem is not so much about the individual being strong as much as it's about actually finding any kind of coherence and about like one person actually recognizing another who's like a freaking stranger and being able to actually, I don't want to use the word community because I think it's a problematic word, but being able to actually form other kinds of recognitions between actually different people. And so I wonder, I guess that's my question is, well, why is the emphasis on the individual, and have you or any of the people you're working with thought about actually looking more at, communality or collectivity or, and these kinds of ideas? And I think that's also related to your thinking about the sort of thinking about what's the ethnic stories, what are the historic stories the woman next to you did.
Folktales.
Thank you.
That makes sense because, again, with the different communities, people, once a character like that is introduced, people are going to try and put them into one community that, is this character from such an area or such an area. So maybe one would end up having to make like 3 or 4 friends, like Charlie's Angels. But, for lack of a better example, but from different areas.
Well, there's somebody that actually talked about doing, instead of doing a geographic map of the world, do a human map of the world that is mapping out the different interest areas and that people, different cultural, the similarities in culture, interests, motivations, and that you could actually look at the world in terms of what values and commonalities that different people spread all around share. And can you focus the attention on that rather than on the geographical properties or boundaries of that? They're getting at the same kind of thing, looking at the humanity of the situation rather than the physical, geographic aspects of the situation, even if they're all connected. So that's obviously a coming idea in some sense, yeah.
When you were talking of common identity, there are different communities, religions, ethnicities in our part of the world, I come from India. So, don't you think it's possible or even desirable to think of a South Asian identity or subcontinental identity by a close reading of our own histories? Because a lot of people have done that, and there are points which probably indicate towards a common South Asian identity. It may not be based on religion because that's not possible. It has been tried in India based on a kind of Hindu identity, but which was disastrous and violent. But don't you think, for example, if we take India, it's probably more varied than the entire Europe. But
Yes.
But it's still an identity. And something, say, as apparently trivial or ephemeral as a sport, say cricket, in India or in Pakistan, we do have cricketing heroes who appeal to all kinds of ethnicities. Sachin Tendulkar is a god in India, and he appeals to the entire country. So don't you think these common and modern myths that are generated in our lifetimes should be the base material for the kind of hero that you are talking of constructing?
You're right, but as far as the South Asian identity is concerned, the problem is that for an intellectual, progressive person, that makes all the sense. But for someone who is not educated, who hasn't had the opportunity to develop to that level, it's not going to accept that.
But how would you explain, say, for example, a singer like Atif Aslam from Pakistan? His popularity is extreme popularity in my part of the country, which is Eastern India, which is, has no commonalities as such. But his popularity in a language we do not even speak. So, how would you explain that?
That's because your country appreciates the arts, because art is part of your religion. Music and dance are part of your worship. In our country, the problem is that music and dance are looked on as bad things, which is the tragedy. That why do all our artists go to India? because art is appreciated there. And that's a tragedy in Pakistan. That's why making a film is such a big challenge. Because first of all, you're told that this is, the word we use is haram. This is totally not acceptable. You're going straight to hell. I've been told that a number of times. Okay, fine. I mean, who's going to be hanging out with in heaven anyway, under the circumstances?
It sounds very boring.
It sounds very worrisome if the current so-called pious lot we have are going to be in heaven.
One of the things that, oh, I'm sorry.
You're trying to answer the question of how to create a specific hero for a specific national and cultural identity. I was just curious, is it possible also look at the opposite, that it's possible to allow the superheroes without a specific, like independent of specific nationalities and cultures, which is more universal type of superhero that is at a basic human level, just like Stuart, you were talking about basic human experience that is universal, that is beyond the differences of culture, but that I think is it possible to also have that kind of heroes that universally identifiable at a basic human level, because by definition, it's a superhero. It's idealized, so it's really larger than specific culture and the life.
Yes, human value would be placed above all. Human value and ethics. Would
So
have
like Superman, I think, could be, to a lot of people around the world being idealized hero, powerful and good, clean-cut moral.
I'd like to send, any of you are interested in looking at any of these questions and then sending your thoughts, ideas, suggestions to Zeba.
And you.
And me.
And you.
And me. I'm going to send this around, and if you intend to do that, take a copy. If you're not going to do that, don't take a copy.
It's a brain teaser because I spent 2 nights thinking whether a superhero in present time introduced into Pakistan would have a beard or not. So I mean, it's every little thing. With how you're dressing him. You know how he's supposed to behave. He's supposed to be the good guy, so he's supposed to fight all the bad things. But how does he look? What appearance is acceptable to everyone? If he doesn't have a beard, a large section of society is not going to accept him. If he does have a beard, a large section will not accept him.
Are you familiar with this initiative in Egypt of animated superheroes that are specifically Muslim to promote Islamic culture in a positive way to Egyptian children? I can't remember the name of it, but it's relatively new, like maybe less than 2 years.
I've heard that Egypt is much more progressive.
Yeah.
And I've heard that there are programs like that in Egypt, but our people may just not allow any such thing with any religious significance. They may go hysterical.
Yeah, I'm just suggesting maybe if you want to look into it, because I know it's been an extremely successful kind of experiment. It's directed at young children. I mean, it's middle schoolers of a children.
They're the best people to direct it because they know what they want to see in a hero.
Yeah. One of the interesting problems that you're going to run into, and that anybody who here gets into film writing is going to get into, is the fact that it's much easier to write action-adventure movies and violence and shooting and sex scenes and explosions than it is to write something that's more nuanced and gets into the kind of values that you're talking about. It takes a better writer who's got a more open mental system to write a script where you get the fact that they're talking about a basic value here. Not whether I can kill somebody, but why am I killing him? It's sort of like when they did Unforgiven. The movie was not about killing, per se. It was about the effects of killing on the killer. And that's a really subtle distinction, but profound. And many people missed it. Clint Eastwood didn't miss it. The reason he chose to make that movie was because it was about the ravages of being a murderer. How does it take your life? So it takes a lot more writing skill to write stuff that you're talking about, to deal with values, than to simply talk about killing people in the name of goodness.
You need to have layers, because there's a certain audience that only comes to action movies. There's a certain audience that's only going to come to a woman's oriented movie. So you have to have something in there which goes through the different levels so that you get the audience, because that's the only way you're going to be able to get the idea across to them.
Sure, it's like Gulliver's Travels. How many different levels of meaning are there, and at what ages do they suddenly make sense to you and you didn't notice them before?
Well, the Pixar movies are good at that. But
They are too.
there's a French movie called A Prophet, and it was specifically made to make an Islamic prophet, and it's modeled after a gangster prison movie, and,
Really?
and the hero tries to not be violent, but ends up, it ends up being a story.
Is
But
it on
it's
YouTube?
really exciting. It's on Netflix. I saw it on Netflix, but it's French. It's beautiful, absolutely amazing.
I must get
And it's amazing too, like how, what we're really talking about is how mechanical reproduction has like pushed itself out in the worldwide. And we don't have, like the only place where dialogue like this lives is in places like this, inside
I
this
know.
educational institution.
Dr.
And it's a shame.
Dr. Bishop, I'd like to ask you something. How much does media affect the subconscious?
Well, that's a very complicated area. I mean, there is no
But that's
single answer to that
That's
one.
the area that drives you eventually.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of research that shows that there are ways to measure. I don't know if it's the dynamic Freudian subconscious. It is the non-conscious mind. And so if you subliminally show somebody a term or a word or a picture, and it's got to be subliminal, and then you give them a situation later on, if you had shown them something, a murder or a depression or something sexual, and they consciously say, I did not see that, they will, in an ambiguous situation, in an interpretive situation, in doing like a thematic apperception test, that will color their interpretation. They will see that they will see that picture, interpret the dynamics of that picture, who's saying what to whom and why, more in terms of that which they saw subliminally than had they not seen it subliminally. So clearly it affected their subconscious. Clearly it shaped the way they perceived things and interpreted things, but they were not aware of it. So,
Archetypes, you spoke about that.
well, that's that's such a hypothetical. I love that, but it's hypothetical.
What's more proven than Freud's thoughts?
I'm not talking about Freud. I'm just talking about psychodynamics. Yeah.
Pakistan was formed about the time when it broke off from India, and there's surely a core of those people who moved over to Pakistan when the language disputes began. Is there enough of a core there that one could appeal to those and then have that spread? I'm thinking that perhaps you feel that would be more efficient than trying to unify a bunch of tribal
You see, the core people are mainly the immigrants. And though they are a progressive group of individuals who were very peace-loving until the 90s, when they were driven to turning violent, which is why Karachi, the city I live in, has violence happening all the time, because the other groups don't accept them and that there's constant conflict with the groups from other provinces. So if I appeal to them, I still have 70% of the country or 75% that I'm not targeting.
You know what?
That's the problem.
They've dealt with that problem in terms of interracial relationships in this country. And the psychological research is so clear on this one, which is that if you put people there's enmity between them, and you put them into a situation very much like the Defiant Ones, with Sidney Poitier and Tony Curtis, that you put them into a situation which both want to get solved and neither one can solve it together. They have to open themselves up to the help and assistance of the other person, and they succeed at doing it. Their attitudes toward that other person change. Now, if they go back to their same old culture, it probably won't last. It'll dissipate. But my experience with, say, getting out of prison and escaping from the marshals with a black man, I succeeded. And then I spend more time with black people. I don't even have to immerse myself. I just spend more time with black people because of the fact that I see black people in a more differentiated way because of my experience with this particular black person. The odds of that more open attitude about races is going to hang on. It's going to hold. So if you put people in situations where they are forced to work with somebody who's on the peer level with them, that's the important point. If you take two racial groups who dislike each other, or religious groups, and they are under the supervision of the oppositional group, it's very difficult for them to change their perceptions because all they experience is their anger and the humiliation of being with that person. But if you put them into the same work setting and a peer status, and they succeed in accomplishing something called a superordinate goal, like I mentioned, they open themselves up to seeing that person quite differently. And that would apply to religious groups, racial groups, any kind of dichotomous group. That works. And there's a lot of research done on that could be applied to the filmmaking.
Because as individuals, they're okay with each other. They're fine. They're often very good friends.
Yeah,
it's in the group that they're in conflict.
Well, but when you succeed in doing something, it's a crisis situation. And other research shows that if you have people who are in a crisis situation, their emotional system makes them, it is generalized arousal, their emotional system makes them more open to a lot of stimulation. And one of it happens to be, I more strongly will like somebody. I have, if it's a male, female, I fall in love with her. She's prettier than I thought before I was in this crisis situation with her. There is an emotional openness that then can become a motivator to introduce different behaviors and to open up relationships better.
It certainly sounds like the plot of a movie.
Does it?
Yeah, because, the drama, of course, centered on two individuals who should be in opposition to each other, but because of circumstance, work together and then overcome. And it's no surprise that The Defiant Ones is a classic of Hollywood cinema. It's an interesting kind of concept to think that we could take some of these things we know from the psychological literature and use them as dramatic materials. In your experience, do you see that kind of thing?
Absolutely, because that's where it all starts. And from the psychological level, when you take it to the emotional level and to the mental level, things start dissolving. When people connect on a more human level, the differences dissolve. When they see each other's humanity.
Right. It's a reperception. And with that flows all sorts of different emotional responses to what you're now perceiving differently. And yes, you're right, absolutely. It's the perfect paradigm for making lots of movies, different issues, different cultures, different clashes, but you can use that same kind of paradigm. Yeah.
I have a question. I guess my question has to do, I also don't know enough about the Pakistani media system to help me here. But I guess my question is, what's in it for the industry? I mean, I don't think that it's a well-known fact that the media industry wants to empower people or bring them together.
They don't.
So, I mean, how do we bring in that element of the big picture?
Appeal to the good side and hope that they want to take responsibility as well. Because if they're working in a certain profession, they should want to be giving value to the audience. They should be wanting to improve the lives around them.
Right, but again, it's the individual level that you're talking about. Even individuals who want to do that within a structure are constrained. Right? I mean, we have journalists who really want to do a good job, and the news values kind of prevent that. So,
there's a responsibility that comes with being in the media. And if you have a voice and you can carry a message out, there's a responsibility. If those values can be brought in, because we haven't been able to bring in any other values, religious or political or anything.
commercial.
Well, that's always there. I'm just hoping that this, because, okay.
No, this is not a time thing.
No. Isn't that a dollar sign?
Yeah, it's a dollar sign.
Yeah, I know.
It's a what?
It's a dollar sign.
Well, they benefit from exploiting people's differences, don't they? It's about
Well,
showing.
that runs the news. That doesn't run the entertainment.
Well, fragmentation of the audience, niche marketing, I mean, that's what.
Divide and rule.
That's why we don't have the Time magazines and the things that you were saying. We don't have these mass media where we can create this superhero that everybody's going to see, right? It's the same. That's why we don't. That's why.
But Broadway, Hollywood produces movies that you can't imagine them doing it because it's so anti-establishment. I mean, George Clooney, because he became so powerful, because he was so successful, can get lots of movies made because he agrees to make other movies that will be tentpole movies or box office movies like that. So he can get small movies made that get the values out that he wants to get out. And Hollywood is very happy to do that. And if they make money on it, that's terrific. But even if they don't, they have Clooney for another movie which he will make money on. So how do you make it profitable for people to work against their established self-interest? It's money. That will do it. And then by the time they realize that they've just made a huge mistake because the country is now down on Wall Street, it's too late. You know, it's out there.
But how do you, but that would mean getting someone very influential to put that much money in.
That's right.
How do you do that?
You have a relative in Hollywood.
I don't.
I don't know what to do. There are very powerful people all over who put up money for a big star, and they won't be put off by a certain value system. You don't explode the institutions right away.
But then where do you get we don't have stars that big in Pakistan because they've not been created. We don't have them either. I mean, our biggest star.
You start on television. You start small, inexpensively on television.
We've got loads of television stars.
Well, they should be able to make little movies that. I mean, those are details. I'm a big picture man. I can't do details.
I know. Television doesn't do it. Television won't do it because there are too many channels now.
No.
It did it 30 years ago. It can't do it now.
Is it possible that in Pakistan, and again, I don't know, the real stars are people like A.Q. Khan who can run his supermarket
Yes, they can. But
all over the world without anybody being able to do anything about it?
Yes, but the thing is that he was kept under house arrest for a very long period of time. So,
And even that didn't stop anything.
no. Because everyone is involved in corruption.
So is that everyone's superhero?
And that's not the superhero who I want to support at all.
Understand. I mean, I know that is not an ideal superhero. I'm just wondering whether a country under strain would gravitate in that direction.
It's already so bent in that direction. But I'm trying to sort of maybe pull it out a fraction or two. But the thing is that it's very easy to work on the negative. Very, very easy. You find a lot of support. There's so many people out there who are ready to fund anything anti-Pakistan or anything which is negative. There is no one ready to support the positive.
If you have a Pakistani guy who helps Americans out in an American crisis, you know, it then opens the door to other Pakistanis being represented in the movies.
Yes, rather than the bearded militants who scream and explode.
If you watch any Iranian movies today, Iran has a terrific film industry. They make wonderful movies. Most Americans don't see them.
And they make wonderful movies in spite of a lot of constraints.
Right. And so, but the reason, what happens is you see these people as real human beings, not just people with their mouths open screaming at Americans holed up in an embassy.
But Iranis are very sensitive, very gentle people. Pakistanis are not. I tried to work with Irani filmmakers. They said, we can't.
I know a couple of gentle Pakistanis.
No, there are a lot of gentle Pakistanis, but I'm talking about the general public. Like, we just had this incident where there was this uproar and all these riots over this film.
The Hollywood film
about our prophet.
Yeah, right.
Now, the thing is that on YouTube, where they uploaded a few minutes of that, there were 16 million hits. 22 million people in the world were rioting. Nobody knew what they were rioting about. And out of those 6 million, maybe 1 million were Muslim. I don't think so.
Since I am also coming into that category, in fact, probably you are referring to a minority, in fact, because earlier you mentioned that within the audience understands in Pakistan. It means that the audience has the sensibility to understand. the very few or minority group, they have taken charge of the entire, and they are now leading, and we are looking at them as the common Pakistanis. So that might be
That is also the case. Plus, the case is that the people who are making the trouble are funded to do it. I mean, why does anyone go and do these things? They only do it because they're being paid. From where? I don't know.
I just would be saying 37,000 Pakistanis have been killed in this the ongoing conflict, which is there, in fact, during the last 5-6 years, in fact. So probably they are resisting whatever is going on there. And there are many good people, majority of them. That is why they are resisting all these things. But the issue is that the conflict is so much huge, in fact, that you cannot stay with that in that way where you wish to be, in fact. You will be very, trying to be very protective for yourself and for your family. That is one reason that the religious people, they have overpowered all these things, and now they are, because they are going to sacrifice everything for them.
But they're not religious people because what they're practicing is not religion. It is not any religion.
It is not religion, but they are religious. They are claiming that.
Anyone can claim anything. But they are, I mean, they can't be categorized as Muslim or even as human by what they're doing.
Okay, we have to wrap this up, I believe.
Probably have time for one more question.
Oh, I was going to say, okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, colleagues?
Anybody else want to ask a question? Ask a question of anybody in the room. Ask your next door neighbor, yes.
What are you going to do when you go home this time?
I'm going to try and, I'm going to direct a film which is about making a leader. And it is a sort of role model that I'm trying to create out of a real character. But the interesting thing is that the government on level told me that they would fund it. And last night I got a message saying that if you join our political party, we will fund it. Which makes me so angry. And I'm not joining a political party because if I work for the people of the country.
So what if we send around a little basket that we put money in?
That would probably do it.
That'd be-
In fact, can the basket go to Hollywood? That would definitely do it.
That would
That would probably do my next 6 movies as well.
All right.
Or if George Clooney could do a guest appearance.
I have his number. I'll call him.
He could.
Well, obviously that's a very important thing, who you know, and who you're connected to, and what you can get him to do. It's, you know. But
I've got to do something. Because I cannot rest until I've done something. Whether I get killed doing it or not is another story. And if I survive this one, I'll do a more daring one next, and a more daring one next. And each time I'll bother you with the script.
we'll make sure you're going to do it.
And I'll keep coming back to you.
Why not? Yep. Did you have you had raised your hand, didn't you?
Yeah, the guy behind the camera. You guys, all the hero talk, and that kind of stimulated a little bit of thought. I'm not a big comic book person, but I wanted to ask you both what your thoughts are on what makes heroes identifiable, because it's different between a child audience and a mature audience. It seems to me, from what my observations have been, with a mature audience, what makes heroes identifiable are their flaws. That heroes are placed up on a very high pedestal and are given superhuman abilities, or have this power. But what brings them down to a more human characteristic that we can identify with is that they're all fundamentally flawed. Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, go down the list.
Iron Man.
Iron Man, my favorite. But even like Watchmen in particular, these are all very troubled, flawed people. And it seems like, like I said, with a mature audience, you could say, it means a lot more to me that they were to accomplish this great act because they have these particular characteristic flaws that, I and a lot of other people can identify with, but they still overcame those particular characteristic flaws. I mean, it seems like if you were to create this superhuman or superhero that was completely perfect in every conceivable way, it wouldn't be as appealing, maybe. I don't know.
No, you're probably right. Actually, Dr. Fisher, isn't it people who at a disadvantage or at a very difficult stage in life either flip and then excel or totally disappear psychologically? Isn't it people faced with very extreme circumstances who either then go through some sort of a transformation.
That sounds like if it doesn't kill me, it makes me stronger,
Well,
kind of thing.
Is there a psychological?
I'm having trouble with your question, and I've had trouble with part of the discussion the whole time. There are times that you want a flawed hero. There are times you will want a superhero who is not flawed, who you can depend upon him to relieve you of your burden and save the world, because nobody around you seems to know what the hell they're doing. And so it really depends upon where you are in your life and in your circumstances, what kind of hero meets your needs.
But if you look at the most successful television series recently, like House or Monk or other, I mean, all those big, they're all fundamentally flaws, and they're hugely popular, hugely attractive. There's something about the extraordinary person that is so humanly flawed. And there's this, so I'm following your logic. There's something about it that seems to be attractive to us.
There is, but it's not a steady diet of him.
I'm sorry?
There is something that's attractive about Monk and House. But what they have is a saving grace. They're brilliant, and they achieve certain detectives.
Flawed superhero.
Right.
That's the model of the.
But our culture is at that stage. And one of the points that she was making is she's got to pay attention to where her culture is developmentally, emotionally. And that for certain cultures, at certain points in time, they need the uber hero, who's not that flawed. Even if he's flawed, you can be sure he's going to overcome it. Other cultures at other times, a different hero is more appealing. So you have to tap into where that particular culture or the individuals within a culture are to kind of assess whether or not a hero is going to be attracted to them. It seems to me.
So does Pakistan currently have any role models or heroes that are in the media?
No. The last one was Osama bin Laden.
Wow.
What about Malala?
What about
Malala? I mean, isn't she hugely iconic?
But that's now. I mean, that's happened now.
But she's been, as your friend was saying, she's been the only one willing to kind of speak up, right?
But that's a human tragedy.
Right.
A while ago, there was this other lady who had come here. I think she was abused, Muhtaramai. And she had come up and she'd spoken and she'd gone to court and she'd got her rights. But the thing is, those are real people, and then building onto them is only going to make things difficult for them. So one would need to fictionalize the character. But yes, there would need to be some weakness somewhere for the common man to be able to identify with them. I mean, it's some sort of an activist.
By the way, one of the reasons they have flaws in characters now is because it gives you so much broader room for drama. Conflict comes more easily if you have people struggling to overcome adversity. If everybody's just like Captain Marvel used to be in comic books, I mean, that was boring. He was bland. He never, you never questioned anything. He was never. So you need to have heroes that meet the times. And she, by the way, the 14-year-old girl will become a martyr. She could, if she were in a Christian country, become a saint. But that's not a hero that's going to live on. She doesn't lend itself to longevity. There's no sequence. There's no follow-up to that. So I don't know how she would become a hero, but she would become a martyr.
Well, now she's a role model. Now she is a role model.
And so if somebody else gets shot in the head by the Taliban, they will just produce more people willing to sacrifice their lives like that?
What about Benghazi?
No, I think that's pretty much, I mean, for the Taliban, he is a role model.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, for the general public, I don't think so.
But can't you build a fictional character out of the traits of this?
That's what we need. We need a fictional character.
Yeah, but use the traits of these people, these role models, these girls that have done stuff.
Yeah, but you can't die.
No, not that part.
No.
The empowered part.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Oh, absolutely.
And ending on the empowered part sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.